Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the
designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your
windshield wipers? eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying, just beautiful.
Whatever you love, find it on eBay. eBay. Things people love.
Meaningless stuff. Why do we gift so much meaningless stuff? Tired of generic gifts and hollow trends? Shutterfly allows you to create meaningful photo gifts for your family and friends. Whether it's a cozy fleece blanket for grandma, a stunning canvas print for mom, or a mug to make dad smile. Enjoy 40% off with code MAKE40 at Shutterfly.com. And make something meaningful this year. See site for more details.
Karltenbrunner always appeared to me to be a very reserved type, who was hard to get near as a man to man. Heinrich was like that too, only more cynical. All the same, he had certain human qualities. He never succeeded in getting on the same level as a Reichsführer or the Führer mentally. After Hijack's death, I tried to transfer my friendship to him as Hijack's successor because the Wolff-Hijack friendship was one of the pillars of the original SS. I offered him my friendship and even used du to him, but he never made any use of my offer. That was, of course, Obergruppenführer Karl Wolff, who we are going to come to know in these next couple of episodes. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, the Second World War podcast with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And what we thought we'd do, Jim, is present a two-part series called The Duel, as we've titled it. The Duel.
Nazi badasses.
Which is about the very end of the Second World War.
Oh, my goodness me.
In Europe, in Italy, principally, although events will take us all over, all the way up to Berlin and then north of Berlin. And
some weird corners and weird old asylums.
Yes, peculiar places.
Hohenheilen.
As we enter the end game.
Yes.
And the duel is between two, I'm not going to call them gentlemen, Obergruppenführer.
Two leading Nazi officials.
Two leading Nazi officials. By the way, actually, this is the thing I think we need to clear up. Obergruppenführer is an SS rank.
Yes. It's a general. It's like a full general.
It's basically a general, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a two-star equivalent. I looked this up last night because they're kind of opaque, the ranks, aren't they? Because if you're an Obergruppenführer, are you Waffen-SS as well? Or how does that rank?
They're as high as you can go.
Reichsführer.
And then the next one down is Obergruppenführer.
Yeah. So you're basically, because Himmler is who runs the SS, of course. Heinrich Himmler is the Reichsführer.
The chinless wonder.
So he's essentially a field marshal, but within the parallel organ that is the SS.
Yes.
And so, because some people in the SS are not Waffen-SS as well, are they? Some people do command armies, some people don't. Some come and go.
Well, there's the Allgemeine SS, which is the kind of the camps and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And then there's the Totenkopfverband, which is the people that do the death camps and concentration camps. They are also part of the Allgemeine SS, which is also part of the...
so there's that overlap immediately. Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the SD, which is part of the RSHA, which is the Reich Sicherheitsdienst, or whatever it's called.
I always think when you look at that word sicker, it's secure. That's how it's security. It's sicker. It's the same word. It's the same word.
Sicherheitsdienst is SD. So no, the RSHA is the Reich Security Office, basically. And that incorporates the Kripo, which is the ordinary police, the Gestapo, which is the secret police, and also the SD, which is the secret intelligence service.
Yeah.
I think that's right. It's all very confusing, and in normal Nazi ways, it kind of sort of doubles up a little bit. But Karl Wolff and Ernst Karltenbrunner are the two next down after Himmler in the SS hierarchy. Yeah. And actually, it's quite hard to get high up. So, for example, Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, is a Sturmbannführer, which is equivalent of a Hauptmann, a captain. Yeah. That's all he is. And it's quite hard to get much higher than that. And you can be a divisional commander as a Standartenführer. Yeah. Which is effectively a colonel. Yeah. And a Brigadeführer is obviously a brigadier. Yeah.
But basically, to be one of these people, you've had to have been around since the 30s. You've had to do an awful lot of sucking up, essentially, to people like Himmler.
Yes, and within the SS, there's just unparalleled levels of rivalry and hatred and all the rest of it. And Karl Wolff he's a very interesting character because he was a senior figure in the SS and Himmler's right-hand man. But he was also the liaison officer for Himmler and Hitler in the Führer headquarters. Yeah. So he was around Hitler a huge amount. Yeah. And then he got in a bit of trouble because he divorced his wife and married someone else. And Himmler took a dim view of this because, he's so morally upstanding. This happens over and over again, and it's just so weird.
I knew we were going to come to that in his life story. So basically, before we get any further in, what we're talking about is basically the two second men in the SS, Ernst Karltenbrunner and Karl Wolff, who are both Obergruppenführers, who are one tier down. They're on the next tier down the wedding cake of the SS.
Yes, and because they're the same rank and they're the same tier, they hate each other.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, what's interesting about this is how Hitler runs things. So it's how Himmler runs things as well.
And how Goering runs things and how everyone else runs
things. And everyone runs things. There's two deputies who vie and fight.
Von Treppenberg and Rommel.
Yeah, exactly.
At Normandy.
Exactly.
Different jobs.
It's why everything's going so well.
So what we're looking at here is right at the end of the war, both of them know they've got dirt all over their hands. That their involvement in the SS, their involvement at the highest level pretty much in the Nazi regime is not going to look good. Yeah. They're also looking to how they can save their necks. Yeah. And they suddenly realize, Wolff and Karltenbrunner, that they're actually pitting themselves against each other.
Yeah.
There can be only one winner. And basically, the prize is life.
Not going to the gallows.
Not going to the gallows. And for the loser, it's very gladiatorial. The fun is turned down and it's good night, Charlie. Yeah. So they are increasingly pitted each other and they have different strengths and weaknesses. And the vast majority of it plays out in the Alps, in the South Tyrol, which was Austrian, part of the Austrian Empire, then became Italian. Yeah. Then when the Italians signed the armistice in September 1943, the Germans morphed it back into the Third Reich, into the Greater Reich, and so it had its own Gauleiter, its own sort of governor, a chap called Franz Hofer, and it became the Alpenvorland. And so it's here, all in this area around here, this sort of between world between the southern Austria and northern Italy. And Wolff, by this point, is the highest police officer and leader in Italy, which means that he is effectively running the show from an administrative point of view in Italy. So Kesselring is the military commander, Wolff is the administrative answer. And although Mussolini has been reinstated as the kind of sort of puppet dictator of the socialist Italian Republic based at Salò on Lake Garda, it is Wolff that is pulling all the strings. Yeah. The reason he's been sent there, away from the court of Hitler, is because of this divorce of his wife and this remarrying of the Countess Gisela. And Himmler's taken a dim view of this and so banished him slightly.
Exactly. So, yes, he marries the Countess Ingeborg Mara von Bernstorff.
Bernstorff, that's it.
And Himmler, I mean, this happens again and again, doesn't it? Basically, someone gets married. And is that Himmler, jealous that someone else has got Wolff's attention? Or does Himmler fancy the Countess?
No. It's the same with Hans Frank. They take a very dim view of his philandering and stuff. The family is...
Yes, but they're all at it themselves. This is the thing.
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is, go and have a bit of, fandangoing, but don't split up the family. The family unit is the absolute beating heart of Nazi ideology.
Well, yes, Goebbels is persuaded to stay with his wife, isn't he? As a similar example, isn't he? For all his sort of obsessions with film stars and stuff, he's persuaded to stay at home. And after all, at the end of the war, goes to the grave with her. So, I mean, it is very odd, though, these sort of moral fluctuations. And
Himmler does it all the time in those, in his letters to his wife and all the rest of it. They're incredibly tender and sweet and touching, and, how the little children and all the rest of it. The family unit is really a kind of important part of it. So from the point of view of Wolff, who is the, second tier, one drop down on the tier of hierarchy of the SS, that's not setting a good example.
I just think...
I know. It's bonkers.
These are people running death camps and so on. I mean,
Get yourself into the head of Himmler, okay?
Yeah. Well, I'd rather not if it's all the same to you.
But that's what's going on. And so anyway, so he's sent off to Italy. But what that means is... he's sufficiently high of rank that people will do whatever he says.
Yes, and not ask questions.
But he's also now sufficiently removed from the absolute very core of the Nazi regime that he can also got a little bit of flexibility.
Wiggle room.
Yes. So let's just tell you very briefly about Wolff.
Well, yes, who is he? How old is he?
Yeah, so in 1945, he is 44. He's born in 1900. He is going to turn 45 on the 13th of May.
Yeah.
1945. He's
a lawyer?
Former lawyer, yeah. He's very clever and he's very charming and he's quick and he has a sort of wide forehead, prematurely sort of slightly greying hair. He's got quite thin lips, but he's got quite twinkly eyes and he's a really good natural diplomat. He knows how to get people on side and he's quick-witted. So he can think on his feet.
It worked in advertising, had an advertising agency.
He's had an advertising agency.
Both of these guys have legal training, which I think is what's one of the really interesting things. And very often that kind of goes into the, how could a lawyer end up being evil? Well, let me tell you about the last time I bought a house. They are just people and obviously ambitious people and clever people. And they're both fully committed to the movement. Wolff's in the SS before Hitler takes power. So
1931.
Yeah, he's seen it coming rather than joined the status quo, as it were.
Yeah.
And then Karltenbrunner, who's his rival in this situation, really is your absolute central casting.
Yeah.
Dueling scars on his face.
He's incredibly tall and thin.
Yeah.
So he's 6'7" and he's got this lean face and a slightly sort of hawkish nose. He's not bad looking. He's just, he's striking.
Yeah.
He's a really striking looking character.
Yeah.
But he's got dueling scars on his cheeks, which is this weird thing that people of a certain background like to get at university.
Yeah. Well, you stand off from one another with the blade, don't you, and hold it up and lunge at each other's faces. And the point is the dueling scars, to show you've done it.
Yes.
And to show you've endured it and you don't have the wound stitched or dressed. It's all this sort of mad bollocks. I mean, a society with that going on, little wonder that the intelligent people are plugged into violence and pain as a means of self-expression and so on. And he's Reichssicherheitshauptamt.
Yes, this is the RSH.
Boss, isn't he? Yeah, I mean, we're better off with the abbreviations.
The Reich Main Security Office.
Yeah.
So he's Austrian, whereas Wolff is German.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother layer of kind of, because Hitler's Austrian, but he's also German.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of particularly within the SS, there's an Austrian Nazi camp. And then there's a German Nazi camp.
Yeah, you see, do you think the Austrian guys think they're even more in tune with Hitler because they are Austrian Germans?
Yes, but they're also a bit chippy because they're Johnny Come Lately only joined in 1938.
Exactly.
And
so
they're not German.
In the way that Hitler's chippy about being German because he's not German, it's kind of
all
like...
that.
One of the things I was really struck by when looking over this was it is... Again and again and again, divide and rule is the leitmotif that runs through absolutely everything that happens in Nazi Germany, right?
Yes.
To the point where, when it comes to the surrenders, their expectation is that that's what's going on in the Allied camp because it's all they can think about.
Yep.
Every move they make is an attempt to divide the Allies one way or another because that's what they're all doing to each other. So they're thinking,
point.
We're fighting like rats in a sack. They must be too. And it's only a matter of time before we all split up and fall apart because we can't bear each other. Yes. They must be in the same situation as us. Whereas on the other side is the Allies going, well, surely they can see that they've lost the war if you're objective about it from a material point of view.
And they all absolutely loathe one another. So there is this amazing moment where Eva Hitler's body has been discovered, and the person who picks her up is Martin Bormann.
Yeah.
And then Erich Kempka, who is Hitler's chauffeur, then immediately snatches her off Bormann because he knows how much Eva hated Martin Bormann. Because they're both rivals for the Führer's love. And so he thinks it would be undignified. She'd be really disappointed to know that she was taken to her cremation point by Bormann rather than him.
Oh, Christ.
What the heck? Anyway, to get back to Karltenbrunner and Wolff. So Karltenbrunner is sort of, he has a certain charm and charisma definitely. Yeah. He's got charisma. It's of the kind of sort of brooding, kind of powerful type.
Yeah.
He's an imposing figure. Yeah. He doesn't have much of a sense of humor, whereas Wolff most definitely does.
Yeah.
And Wolff is sort of easy charming and, call me do and all this kind of stuff. And, Karltenbrunner's all sort of buttoned up and kind of sort of corrupted by power and all. Well, they all are. They are chalk.
Complete chalk and cheese, but also absolutely, where eagles dare, kind of archetypes, the cultured but murderous, and then the silent brooding but murderous, basically.
They tick all those boxes. This is where it all came from. It's them.
Yeah.
But both of them, by the early part of 1945, have realised that the writing is on the wall. In fact, actually, Wolff has already kind of, in the previous year, in 1944, has made some forays via the Vatican about looking into channels to kind of for peace. Because what he recognises is, I think he genuinely realises that the war is over and it's pointless to keep on fighting and killing people. He doesn't want to kill Germans. He doesn't want to kill North Europeans and Americans and British. I mean, Jews is a different matter.
That's the interesting thing. Yeah. They are starting to say Germans are going to die unnecessarily. We're going to get more Germans killed and we don't really want to do that. And actually to hear that sort of weird glimmer of compassion in all this is quite jarring, isn't it? Because that is definitely Wolff's motivation, isn't it?
Yes, that isn't Karltenbrunner's motivation. Karltenbrunner's motivation is just, how can I get out of this?
Yeah.
And so Karltenbrunner is in a slightly trickier situation than Wolff on one level, because there is talk of the Alpine Redoubt. And the Alpine Redoubt is this triangle of area between Bad Reichenhall, Berchtesgaden and Salzburg.
Yeah.
It's very mountainous around there, and that is where they're talking about doing the last stand. And the whole idea is that the Führer headquarters is going to move down to the Reichschancellery in Berchtesgaden, which is still there, incidentally. Yeah. And there's plenty of tunnels and the secret sidings and stuff for him to go into, and bunkers and blah, blah, blah. And there's bunkers all under the Obersalzberg, which is where the Berghof is, and, Hitler's house, and Bormann's and Goering's and all the rest of it, and where the Karlstein house is and the Eagle's Nest. So that's where they're going to do it. And Karltenbrunner is absolutely up to his neck in all this and knows all about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously, clearly thinks that this is a complete waste of time and not going to happen.
He knows the game's up, doesn't he?
They both know the game is up. But Karltenbrunner has to maintain the pretense of continuing the Alpine Redoubt.
Yeah, because
Wolff doesn't have to.
He's not got Wolff's wiggle room because he's still in town, as it were, and under the microscope, isn't he? Is the point.
But Karltenbrunner's sort of home turf is Vienna, but it's also Innsbruck. Yeah. It's also that kind of, the North Tyrol rather than the South Tyrol. So the kind of Alps is very much his kind of manner as well. Yeah. But also Berlin and the Führer headquarters and the Reichskanzlei and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Whereas Wolff's manner is very much now the South Tyrol, the Alpenvorland. And that means they're very close, both of them, to Switzerland. And Switzerland is neutral. And that is where Allan Dulles is.
Yes, well, this is very interesting, isn't it? Because people who know the history of OSS and the CIA will know the name Allan Dulles pretty well. He's like...
Yes, so the OSS is the Office for Strategic Services. It's sort of halfway between MI6 and SOE, the Special Operations Executive. So it's a foreign overseas secret intelligence service, but it's also a sabotage operation. It's all doing the kind of SOE stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because the Americans have copied this from the British, haven't they? Because they don't have any of this in place before the war. They think spying's ungentlemanly. You don't read the other chap's messages.
There is no such thing as the CIA.
None of it. A lot like American military power that we take completely for granted, and the CIA, which of course people take completely for granted to the point where they think it's involved in absolutely everything. I mean, maybe this, for all we know, Jim, this podcast is a CIA front. We're just not aware of it. For all we know, Goalhanger could actually be a CIA puppet organisation.
Or FSB.
Or FSB. It's just no way of knowing.
Or KGB, NKVD, OSS,
as long as
whatever.
As long as the checks keep coming, I don't care. But
exactly. I'm prepared to sell my soul. You're no better than Ernst Karltenbrunner, you swine.
I mean, they do have, on The Rest is Confidential, there is now a CIA agent on the book, so I think you could quite firmly argue that we're just another CIA puppet organisation. Certainly, I've been accused of being an MI6 frontman in my time.
I never have. I never have. Rachel used to claim that she was still working for Smersh when I first knew her. Said she was a secret operative, and even though Smersh had been put down, that it was still secretly, clandestinely in operation, and she was working for them.
Anyway, the Americans set up...
Back to Dulles.
Well, yeah, so Roosevelt says to an old pal of his, Wild Bill Donovan, who's a...
He's completely fantastic, by the way. He's an absolutely amazing guy, incredibly good-looking, gung-ho type.
Says to him, do me a thing that does these jobs, that does the bit of MI6, a bit of SOE and all that. And it's quite interesting because SOE, after all, maybe one of SOE's problems is that it's running in opposition to MI6 a lot of the time, or at least in competition with it. Although if you're a French person on the ground, you don't give a damn who's from which.
Yeah. Or if you're Claude Dancer, you feel you're running the whole thing anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But the Americans have got one body to do this rather than several, which is, I think, probably an enormous leap forward, arguably. But Dulles is recruited even by Donovan even before OSS is formed.
Yes. Well, formally formed.
Yes, officially. And he's in Switzerland. And Switzerland, as you say, certainly by this stage of the war, is an ideal place to have someone running a mission, essentially. Because he's in Bern, so he's in direct contact with Washington, but also with your favourite soldier, Alexander the Great, Field Marshal Sir Harold Alexander, who's Supreme Allied Commander in the Med. So he is absolutely, if you're Karltenbrunner or you're Wolff, if you're going to go to anybody...
He's your man. Dulles is your man. And Dulles is super smart, a super smooth operator. He's a lawyer, but he's also a diplomat.
Yeah.
He's been part of the American delegation at the Paris Peace Conference following the end of the First World War.
Yeah.
He's later a legal advisor on arms limitations to the League of Nations.
Yeah.
And so in the 1930s, he's met Hitler. He's met Mussolini. He's met a lot of these leading Nazis. He speaks a number of languages, including French and German. So he's incredibly well placed.
Yeah.
So clearly, contacting the OSS and particularly contacting Dulles is absolutely number one top priority if you're wanting to kind of do clandestine peace feelers and if you're Wolff or Karltenbrunner. The problem is, the only way you can do this is with go-betweens. And these go-betweens just don't grow on trees. I mean, they're kind of really hard to come by and they have to be trusted and it's really, really difficult. Absolutely no question that in this, Wolff has the advantage.
Well, because after all, if you're Dulles, you cannot be seen meeting Karltenbrunner or Wolff.
No.
Because they're Himmler's number
spies
two.
everywhere.
They're literally Himmler's number twos. You can't be seen with shits that big. If you're Karltenbrunner or Wolff, the reverse applies because after all, you live in a world of paranoia and permanent treachery. So if you actually
and people are out to get you. So the moment you do this and you kind of steer off the path of righteous Naziness, you're in big trouble. So both these guys are taking enormous risks, just even doing sort of gentle forays to try and sort of, see whether they can make contact.
Yeah. Wolff knows the game's up because he's spoken to some mates who were at the Ardennes in the Leibstandart who said they'd been promised 3,000 aircraft and none had appeared.
But I think,
I think he knew before then. I think anyone paying attention.
I know he said that, but I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that
anyone paying attention knows by now. I mean, or should have known.
And then you've got to think, how am I going to get out of this mess?
How am I going to extract myself from this mess?
From the mechanizations of the Nazi state.
So, who's Wolff's go-between?
Well, his go-between is not a particularly brilliant go-between because he doesn't have anyone, he doesn't have a kind of sort of wealthy Swiss businessman. He doesn't have any Italians who can kind of, just slip across the border.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any of these people. So the contact is actually made by one of Karltenbrunner's direct SS agents, another Austrian called Sturmbannführer Wilhelm Hertel. Right. And Hertel is a really, really interesting character. He's absolutely Iago-like, kind of Machiavellian, kind of greasy mover and shaker. He's become an ardent Nazi as a teenager and joined the SS at 16, then later recruited by the SD in Vienna. But it's not until Karltenbrunner takes over the RSHA following the assassination of Heydrich in Prague in July 1942, whenever it was, summer of 1942, that he gets onto kind of Karltenbrunner's radar, who takes him on because he's an Austrian, because he's also clearly a very, very competent and intelligent mover and shaker. And it is Horrell who manages to effectively find Mussolini and helps plan the operation by Otto Skorzeny that springs Mussolini from his mountaintop incarceration in the Abruzzi Mountains, on the Gran Sasso and the Abruzzi Mountains, back in September 1943. He was also directly involved in the arrest of Count Galeazzo Ciano, who is Mussolini's son-in-law and the former foreign minister.
And whose diaries are one of those sort of amazing windows into the Mussolini government. And always come up.
But also Horrell has been very, very involved in building up contacts in Hungary, which is vital once the Nazis occupy the country in March 1944, and which then absolutely directly helps seal the fate of Hungary's 725,000 Jews, not least because Horrell also knows Eichmann.
Yeah, so he's key to the Holocaust in Hungary. So, I mean, as emissaries go, he's maybe not the best person, but then he's entirely representative of the organisation.
Yes.
In that respect, isn't he?
Exactly. So Horrell is trying to make contacts to the OSS.
Yeah.
Karltenbrunner said, right, get onto this. Get onto it and make contacts as quickly as you can.
Does that involve going to Bern, sitting in a bar and saying to the barman, do you know Allan Dulles? I mean, how does it work?
Yeah, okay, so they are able to move in and out of Switzerland a little bit, and particularly through the Austrian side. So, Bern is in the German-speaking bit of Switzerland, isn't it? So he's able to kind of move in civvy clothes and all that kind of stuff. And you just ask questions and you kind of say, how am I get to this guy's office?
Excuse me, I wonder if you know where Allan Dulles is? Ja, bitteschön.
I suppose so. I don't
it's
know.
Interesting, isn't it?
History doesn't entirely relate.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he's first to be given instructions. So Karltenbrunner is first off the peg in trying to make this happen. But the person that actually gets to Dulles is Wolff.
Yeah. Right, okay. So while the SS's man in Bern is at a bar...
Reading newspapers and drinking
coffee.
Reading
a newspaper and smoking cigarettes. And he's the one with the blood-red carnation. That's who he is.
Yeah. And the trilby close over his eyes.
While that's happening, we will take a brief break. And then we will return with SS rats fighting in a sack for survival at the end of the Second World War.
With Uber Reserve, good things come to those who plan ahead. Family vacay? Reserve your ride as soon as you book your flights. To all the planners, now you can reserve your Uber ride up to 90 days in advance. See Uber app for details.
Welcome back to Weird Ways of Making You Talk. The Duel, Part 2 of Part 1, in which it's Karltenbrunner versus Wolff, the battle for survival. Who is the weakest link?
And in the early stakes, Karltenbrunner's ahead.
Karltenbrunner's ahead, but Wolff may have the edge. So, the attempts to make contact, and these are early, because after all, the surrender in Italy is signed on the 2nd of May, and this is going on well before that, isn't it? That's the truth.
Yeah. So at the very end of February 1945, Karl Wolff is holding a secret meeting at his incredibly well-appointed villa on Lake Garda, which is just sort of in the foothills of the Alps. And those attending are enemy of the show, Standartenführer Walter Rauff, who we met before and we talked to Philippe Sands about, and who Philippe Sands is obsessed with, and who eventually got away and got to Chile. He was the man who said, give me one good SS division and I'll have this country licked into shape in 1962 in Chile.
That's right, he did, didn't he? Yeah. And then you've Eugen Dollmann, who's an art historian.
And what Ralph at this point is head of the SS in Milan, by the way.
Yeah.
So he's one of Wolff's men.
And he invented the mobile gas chamber. That's the degree of commitment to the cause. There it is. Eugen Dollmann is an art historian, German ambassador to the Vatican. Gruppenführer Wilhelm Haster, who's an SS general in the SD.
So he's Schellenberg. So head of the SD is Wolf Schellenberg, who works directly underneath Karltenbrunner.
Yeah.
And the SD are then spread around the kind of northern parts, northern cities. And the headquarters of the SD, the Sicherheitsdienst in Italy, is in Verona.
Yeah.
And that's Haster. And Haster is directly under the command of both Wolff and Karltenbrunner because he's SD.
Yeah.
So the SD is part of the RSHA, but because he's in Italy, he's under Wolff's jurisdiction.
And in your minds, you need to hold on to the fact that there's an art historian involved in some of this, because as we'll see...
Oh, yes.
You might ask yourself, why are the Germans bothering with Italy at this stage? Why not go back to the Brenner Pass, put a great big cork in it, stop the Allies, give Italy up. What's the point? Put a great big bung in the Brenner Pass so that the Allies can't come up through the Alps. It's impossible, because there's plenty of very good reasons in Italy for sticking around, aren't there? Especially if you're thinking about after the war.
Yes.
And bargaining chips.
Exactly that.
Essentially.
So Haas is a particularly attractive character who's been responsible in a large part for rounding up many of the Dutch Jews, including Anne Frank.
Yeah.
But he's also now moved to Italy and is having a lovely time up there, just swanning around.
Yeah.
But probably the most important person who's there is Luigi Perilli. Yeah. And he is a wealthy, right-wing Italian industrialist with very strong business connections and personal connections in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And he has suggested to Wolff that he can try and make contact with Allan Dulles.
Right.
And Wolff goes, das ist gut.
So, Perilli, you leave it with me, I fix it for you. I mean, when you catalogue the people like this, you think, why on earth are the Americans possibly going to speak to them? Because they're such damaged goods, aren't they, in every respect? And, if we're talking unconditional surrender, you're not going to parley with Karltenbrunner's or Wolff's representatives on earth. Anyway, they go to Switzerland on the 3rd of March.
Yes. They do this because Perilli knows a guy called Max Hussmann.
Yeah.
Hussmann runs a private school in Switzerland, and he's fabulously well connected. It's one of the poshest, smartest schools. And so because of that, he's all the industrialists, all the smart people in Switzerland,
yes, of course,
and people around in the Alps, they send their kids to Hussmann. So he knows them. And Hussmann is really good friends with, he knows Dulles, but he also knows Dr. Gero von Schultz-Gavenitz. And von Schultz-Gavenitz is a German-born American businessman based in Switzerland.
Right.
Who's very much on the Allied side.
Yeah.
But knows all the right people. And he also knows Jürgen Dollmann, who is, this cultured art historian.
Yeah.
And that's because they deal in that world where, because they're so rich, they have nice works of art and all the rest of it.
And there's lots of works of art floating about at this point.
Yes, and there are. And von Gavenitz is really tight with Dulles. He's his right-hand man in the OSS, as well as being this German-born American businessman. But he's absolutely American.
Yeah.
So Gavenitz, Hussmann, these are exactly the kind of conduits and connections that Wolff needs. So he rubs his hand together. So Perilli and Dollmann would both together go and travel to Switzerland and attempt to make contact with Dulles, both through von Gavenitz and through Max Hussmann.
Yeah. And they basically, Dulles demands that the SS that free Ferruccio Parri, who's an Italian resistance leader, and Antonio Usmiani. He demands that they're freed from captivity in Verona as a test to see if, A, if he's serious, and B, if he has any actual power, I suppose. That's the other way of testing, if he can call any shots. And it's amazing, this. 3 days later, the 6th of March, Wolff says, I'll free him and I accept the terms of unconditional surrender. Now, this is really interesting because this is the thing that really leapt out at me, Jim, when I was reading your notes, is that we talk an awful lot about it's Hitler's death that frees everyone from their oath, right? That's the sort of the spell breaking. Suddenly we can down tools if we want to. That's not what's going on here at all. Wolff's accepting the Fuhrer's still alive, and he's absolutely sees this is the only way out.
Yeah.
So for people this close to the Nazi centre, there's plenty who are not bound by that oath, right? Or there's enough, or there's significant figures who are not.
Well, anyone who's got any sense, yeah.
Well, exactly, which I think you could argue points to maybe the oath thing doesn't quite stack up, or maybe it's not that powerful a magnet or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. It's peculiar. Or anyone with any brains, at least, is thinking. And these are clever men. That's the other thing to remember.
Yes, but also think about what Wolff's got to do. Because if everyone says, hang on a minute, what are you doing laying out Parri? Ferruccio Parri ends up being the first post-war Italian prime minister.
Well, there we are.
So he's a serious player in the kind of political opposition to fascist control in northern Italy.
Yeah.
What's he doing? And how does he justify this? Well, he justifies this by, saying, it means concessions and, the quid pro quo is the Allies have promised to not bomb this and this was a small act and, he can bullshit.
He's still on thin ice.
He's still on incredibly thin ice. I mean, I cannot stress enough just how incredibly high risk it is what Wolff is doing. And it's just about to get riskier because on the back of this, Dulles goes, okay, you're serious. Come to Switzerland then.
I know, that's amazing.
Again, for Wolff to go to Switzerland, he can't be seen.
No.
And it's amazing. So he goes by car that then joins a train that passes over the border at the Gotthard Pass, which is up in kind of northwest Italy. There, however, the snow is still so deep that the train can't get any further. So Wolff has to be, Wolff has basically been on a train with the kind of, in a compartment, guard outside.
The blinds down, the whole thing.
All the rest of it. Now he's got to get out and walk to several hundred yards where a Swiss train is waiting on the far side of the drifts.
Yeah.
But, hat down, it's kind of, shades and hoodie kind of time.
Yeah.
No one seems to recognize him, and he manages to get into another compartment with the blinds down, and off he goes. And they roll on to Zurich.
It's absolutely amazing, isn't it?
And at this point, he got there, and Dulles is then having second thoughts, thinking, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
Oh, should I do this? Should I do this? Not least because the Soviets have got wind that there's these potential talks going on. Yeah. And they're like, hang on a minute, you can't do this without us.
Yeah.
And Wolff says, if Wolff was trying to trick me, the consequences could be unpleasant. I could see the headlines. Envoy of President Roosevelt receives highest SS officer. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what it would be.
Well, and you're back to, a super turbocharged stink around what happened with Vichy.
All that, yeah, and everyone knows about this.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the opportunity to meet, the number 2 in the SS.
Yeah.
Second equal, obviously.
Yeah.
Is also just too good an opportunity to pass. So
you're not going to pass that up. If you can end the war early.
You can end the war, and then you can be there as well.
Save lives, you could be the guy who ended the Second World War. I mean, who wouldn't want to be that person?
Hero.
Exactly.
Which one is it? But he's got a number of safe houses in Zurich, including one on, again, Fürstrasse, in the heart of the city, and he decides to meet him face to face. So he does. He says, I'm going to keep you waiting a little bit. I'm going to insist on seeing Usmiani and Pari first, which he does.
Yeah.
So keeps Wolff waiting in Max Hussmann's Zurich apartment. And the hours are passing, and Wolff's pacing up and down in Hussmann's apartment and sort of going, when am I going to see Herr Dulles? And all this kind of stuff. But eventually he's kind of hustled out the back door, shuffled into a car, and off he goes.
But also, every second for him, the longer he's there, the more exposed he is, potentially, blah, blah, blah.
And he says to Dulles, I control the SS forces in Italy, and I am willing to place myself and my entire organization at the disposal of the Allies to terminate hostilities.
But, of course, the problem is here, he's only one of the people in charge in Italy.
Yep, he doesn't speak for the Wehrmacht. He only speaks for...
Yeah, and the Wehrmacht is, after all... Smiling Albert, isn't it? It's Kesselring. It's Feldmarschall Kesselring.
Yeah, and we know how loyal he is to his oath.
Well, exactly. And here's a peculiar business, isn't it? That the Wehrmacht guy is more loyal right now than the SS guy.
Yeah, I know. Just bonkers, isn't it? It's just, again, it's one of the sort of strange paradoxes of the whole thing. But Wolff does have a very good relationship with Kesselring. I mean, Wolff always makes it his business to try and be as friendly and charming and kind of get as many people on board as possible. And why wouldn't you?
Because that's one of his talents.
That's one of his talents. And so he does. So he has a very good relationship with that. The other key thing is that the bargaining chip that Wolff has is he does have the Brenner Pass, which is the key access point. It's a key artery between the Southern Reich and Northern Italy. Yeah, because it passes from Austria into South Tyrol, and North Tyrol into the South Tyrol. Which admittedly now is sort of, strictly speaking, kind of morphed into the Reich, but it is the kind of route into Italy.
Yeah. Which, of course, if Kesselring had any sense, he'd have fallen back to, and, none of this would be happening.
But, he talks a good talk. And so he says, gentlemen, he says to Dulles.
This is amazing.
And Gavenitz, if you can be patient, I will hand you Italy on a silver platter.
Amazing.
So, so far, so good.
Yeah.
But the other problem is he's got to get back to Bolzano, which is a sort of town in the South Tyrol, beautiful town in South Tyrol, and persuade Kesselring to fall into his plans. But, that's not going to be that easy.
No.
And things start to unravel very quickly. First, as a message arrives that Karltenbrunner wants to see him urgently in Innsbruck. Well, that suggests that Karltenbrunner's got wind of what he's up to.
Yeah.
And someone sneaked, basically.
Yeah.
Then on the return trip, he's traveling back towards Lake Garda when his car is strafed by an Allied fighter plane. And he's incredibly, his car gets knocked off the road and all the rest of it. He's incredibly lucky to survive. Then, having got back to his villa on Lake Garda, he learns that Kesselring has been urgently summoned to Berlin. And the rumor has it that Hitler's about to appoint him to command all German forces in the West, OB West. And that means that he'd be leaving Italy, and a replacement, very possibly someone that Wolff doesn't know, would be taking over. So he's got to kind of start that relationship all over again.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Wilhelm Hertel has been making contact with Dulles, although Karltenbrunner is not offering the surrender in Italy, but one in Austria.
Yeah, and that's significant, though, because he wants to surrender to the West rather than the Soviets.
Of course. But although it's Austria, the implication is that without Austria, you can't maintain Italy, so Italy then follows.
Yeah.
So
Dulles sort of thinks, I don't know about this Hurtle guy.
Yeah. There's no Dolman, there's no Perilli.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, at a glance now, Wolff seems to be ahead of Karltenbrunner, doesn't he? Because after all, he has offered Italy on a silver platter. Hurtle's not quite really.
Well, Hurtle has made contact with one of Dulles's men, but he hasn't got close. He hasn't got that kind
had
of
the face-to-face.
He hasn't had the face-to-face, and he hasn't got the smooth passage to the king of the OSS court in Bern that Wolff has access to through Perilli and Dolman.
Now, what we haven't done, though, we've talked about how sort of SS these guys are and their active involvement in the stuff that the Nazi state has been doing in Europe. But what criminal activity are they also up to?
Well, this is just amazing.
These guys are spent as 9 bob notes that they've literally printed themselves, because this is the thing. Karltenbrunner's sideline is making money, isn't it?
Well, also, you can't put all your eggs in one basket of peace feelers through Allan Dulles to save you. You've got to have a plan B, and you need a fairly big one. And whatever happens, you're going to need cash.
Yeah.
For bribery, for kind of, greasing palms.
And this is Karltenbrunner's speciality, isn't it? He's forging and he's got Jewish forgers that he's got from camps, hasn't he? Brought in.
Yeah.
And by 1943, for people from Sachsenhausen, by 1943, he's got 140 prisoners producing tens of millions of pounds worth of notes on 6 flatbread printing presses. It's just amazing.
We should just say very, 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 very quickly that this counterfeiting was originally designed by the SD back in 1940 as a weapon to destabilise the British economy. They were going to flood the British economy with forged British banknotes. It didn't really work at all, and it kind of disappeared. But then when Karltenbrunner takes over, the whole thing is revived as Operation Bernhard.
Yeah.
And as you rightly say, this is the Jewish prisoners at Sachsenhausen. They've got these printing presses there, these 6 flatbed printing presses. And they are absolutely perfect. And by May 1944, they've also, Karltenbrunner's also got them doing dollars. I mean, well, why not?
He's doing a whole lot, yeah.
And as everyone knows, dollars are incredibly easy to forge.
Yeah. And he's getting those into Switzerland, putting them in bank accounts. He's burying a lot of it.
So he's now got another scallywag in his pay, a chap called Friedrich Schwendt. And Schwendt is an extraordinary character. There's no known photo of him. He's obviously right-wing and racist and all that kind of stuff. But basically, he's not ideologically motivated at all. He's just an absolute chancer. He sort of married a gorgeous, kind of older, much richer woman in the 1930s. He was a second-hand Karl salesman, basically. Yeah. And he's about as dodgy as they come.
And his job is laundering this cash.
He's got to launder the money. He negotiates with Karltenbrunner 33.33% of every pound and dollar that he...
I mean, how's he doing this? Nail bars?
Nail bars,
car
American
washes,
candy, cash-only haircuts. yes, all that kind of, and the rest. He's actually thinking a little bit bigger than those Turkish ones. Absolutely, Salisbury's stuffed full of them.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, whatever. If they only accept cash, they're not having my hair. It's basically how I think about it. Anyway, so Schwendt is amazing. He set himself up in this place called Schloss Labers. Schloss Labers I've been to, and it's in beautiful vineyards on a hill overlooking Murano. Murano is down another little side valley. So the main valley goes up through Bolzano. Then there's this little side valley, and there's Murano. It's absolutely beautiful. It's this gorgeous kind of mountain spa town. The Schloss Labers is on one side overlooking. The great thing about it is it's not a million miles from Innsbruck. It's not a million miles from the Brenner Pass. You can get there reasonably easy. Yeah. It's close to Switzerland. You can get into the Reich and get out of the Reich. You can move things around. But Murano itself is on a sort of little side valley, so you don't go there unless you're going there. So it's kind of discreet. And the Schloss Labers is this beautiful little sort of villa, sort of Victorian era villa on the edge of town, overlooking the town, which is his base. And, he sets himself up there and he buys lots of hotels and properties and ships and anything else.
Anything he can get his hands on.
And all with suitcases of cash.
A network of couriers and agents, including some Jews. So there's a Dutch Jew called Jack van Herten, who's working under the guise of he's working for the Red Cross, and he's smuggling Jews to the Middle East, but he's also doing money laundering. I mean, this is an extraordinary operation. And then Wolff, who's, of course, the police chief in Italy.
It's right under his nose.
It's right under his nose, but Wolff's got his own shizzle going on.
Well, these are insurance policies. That's the bottom line. So Karltenbrunner's got his money laundering. It's just, it is absolutely amazing. Sven's got so much money that he's actually bought a warehouse at the Murano racecourse.
That's full of money.
It's just full of cash.
Yeah. And all of it bent, but no one's looking too closely at the stage of the war as well, are they? That's the other thing.
But if you made a film of this, no one would believe it, would they?
No one would believe it. Yeah. And then you've got Wolff is basically, he's not bothering with cash, he's bothering with hard assets, isn't he? In the form of priceless works of art.
Yes. And again, this can be worked either way. It can be worked in favour of Hitler, or it can be worked in favour of the Allies, which way the wind blows.
I am merely collecting the art for the Führer Museum that is planned for Linz after the war.
Basically, back in 1938, the Führer, Hitler goes to Florence, is very impressed by the Uffizi and thinks, I want one of those.
I bet he didn't have to stand in a queue. Like, I was less impressed with the Uffizi due to the queue.
Yeah, no. Kind of getting that caper. The other problem with the Uffizi, just a little segue here, is I remember going around and, you see your first Botticelli and you go, God, that is just amazing. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. And then the next one you go, God, that's pretty good too. Yeah, the third one you're sort of going, yeah, all right.
You're totally punch drunk within 10 minutes.
Punch drunk. There's only one way to do it, and that is to go, right, I'm going to see 6 works of art, and that's going to be it. But then you think, well, yeah, but I've just queued for bloody 2 hours. You cannot win. Anyway.
Hitler likes the Uffizi and wants his own.
He wants his own. This is going to be the Führer Museum, which incidentally is brilliant because this was going to be built as a sort of, absolutely neoclassic with a kind of fascist twist kind of look, Speer kind of style thing.
Yeah.
And now in Linz is this ultra modern art, modern building with lots of fluorescent lights that kind of, flipping on and off all night.
He wouldn't like it. Let's put it that way.
He wouldn't like it. Degenerative.
So works of art have been collected, Botticelli's, Cranach, Rubens, Michelangelo, Raphael, and so on have been collected for this future Führer Museum. But obviously, the war's not going necessarily...
Well, he's able to do this because he's got this guy called SS Standartenführer Professor Alexander Langsdorff. And Langsdorff is in cahoots with the curators of the Uffizi and other galleries. And they've all been saying, right, we need to get all this stuff out of Uffizi, because the battle's going to... This is in the summer of 1944.
Yeah.
The war's going to come through, can't risk them, we've got to hide them, and all the rest of it. All the Italian curators go, I think, just sort of, just outside of Florence will be fine. And Langsdorff go, I think it would be better to take them north where they're completely safe. And Wolff gives him permission and gets him the trucks and all the rest of it and the fuel, which the Italians don't have.
Yeah.
So he holds all the aces. So he goes, no, this is still yours. Don't worry, we're just looking after them. And off they go in these trucks.
Yeah.
And they're dispersed, not in Tuscany, but in the South Tyrol. Everything happens in the South Tyrol.
And in 2 locations.
11,000 works of art.
God. Well, as far as we know, 11,000 works of art.
No, they've all... Well,
they've definitely all been found? Full inventory.
I don't know what my sandwich is, but yeah.
Okay, right, okay. Because, these numbers are, untrustworthy people. Basically, only Langsdorff and Wolff and a handful of people know where they are.
Yeah. And where are they?
Yeah, vanished them.
Yeah.
And then, so that's the summer of 44. January 1945, at the end of January, Wolff gets a direct order from Bormann that says, based on the Führer's orders, the existence of all confiscated works of art, especially paintings, objects of artistic interest, and weapons of artistic importance in Greater Germany and the occupied territories, is to be reported to the Führer's advisors. In other words, the Führer wants to know what you got.
Hand them over.
Yeah. And he gets a memo from Himmler as well, saying, send them to my salt mine, where I'm going to be looking after this stuff, the Führer Museum. I mean, it's all naked, isn't it?
Yeah.
The plunder aspect.
So Wolff's in a little sort of tricky situation because he's sort of, So he says to Emily, he said, well, obviously, Reichsführer, I'd love to do that, but I just haven't got the vehicles or fuel at the moment. But don't worry, they're safe. And obviously they're going to go to the Führer Museum. Himmler can't really do anything about it. He sort of can, but he can't. But he doesn't. But also the other thing is that he hasn't got the faintest, neither Himmler nor Hitler or Bormann have the faintest idea of what he's already
got his hands on. Yeah.
So Wolff thinks, what I need to do here is do a really, really careful inventory. So again, I'm covered because if the Allies, this doesn't pan out as I hope.
Yeah.
Because Wolff's thinking, I can use them as a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
I can sell them. I can keep them myself.
They're in safekeeping, aren't they?
But his safekeeping, he can do what he wants with them. I mean, he can hand them over to Hitler if that would be
the right thing to do.
He can sell them. He can hand them over to the Allies.
Yeah.
He can do whatever he wants. But he needs a further insurance, which is an inventory of all there is. So he makes these albums of them all, which, Hitler loves his albums of art. You can still see the album, the original albums that Hitler made for the Führer Museum, which were all the ones that were in the Altersee. But they were in cellars in Munich, then shifted to these salt mines in Altersee in the middle of Austria.
Yeah, but it counts as an insurance policy in any direction because he can say to the Allies, oh, no, I didn't give them to Himmler. No, of course not. I kept them from him. If he has to, it flips in all directions, that policy. In the middle of March, he goes back to Switzerland to see Dulles again.
Yes.
And he started to sort of clear house, isn't he? So he's issued orders forbidding violent operations against partisans.
Yep. Which he absolutely does do.
Which he does do. So he's behaving himself from an Allied perspective. This doesn't get back to Berlin, which is interesting, isn't it?
Yes. He's making most of the hiatus between the army group commander.
Yeah, and Kesselring's absence. Although Dulles then asks him, would he be able to agree a surrender without the army commander? And he says, if there's no other ways, then I'm prepared to deal with this alone. I mean, he's really sticking his neck out, isn't he?
Yeah.
However, the Soviets now do know about this. And I think this is one of the ongoing Allied problems for the whole of the war is that the Soviets always know what's going on in the West, one way or another. Yeah. Word gets out. And of course, what the Soviets never do is send anyone west. They never send anyone if they can possibly avoid it. You've always got to go to them. You know, that's why you have conferences in Tehran. You have to go to them. They won't come to you. And as far as the Soviets are concerned, Dulles is going behind Russian backs.
Yeah.
And they don't like it, do they?
Well, because they've got designs on Italy becoming communist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and they want to control everything.
They want to control everything. They're total control freaks. Yeah.
Simple as that, yeah.
But he does go and meet him at Ascona on the Swiss-Italian border on the 19th of March. And also present then, and this is really, really important, is Field Marshal Alexander's American Chief of Staff, General Lyman Lemnitzer.
Yeah.
And a British General, Terence Airey. And this is the first time ever in the entire war up to that point that Allied and German generals have met on neutral ground.
Incredible.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And Wolff brings with him the news that General von Veitinghoff, the former 10th Army commander in Italy, is now the CNC who's taken over from Kesselring, which he believes is good news because he gets on well with von Veitinghoff, who he knows because Veitinghoff's been in Italy before.
Yeah.
And Wolff, for his part, is also relieved to hear that the negotiations that he's got with Dulles have now got an operational name, Sunrise. And that for him is a really, really important...
Concrete, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bone and a half because it tells him that against all the odds, these talks are clearly leading somewhere.
Yeah.
And he tells the Allied contingency that Kesselring still has a really important part to play, even more so now because he's CNC West. So what Wolff is doing is saying... I have a really good relationship with Kesselring, and Kesselring is in the whole of West. So actually, I could not just bring about peace and unconditional surrender,
the
whole lot.
Yeah,
I have laid the groundwork for Kesselring, Wolff tells him. And what is more, I have a perfectly legitimate reason to visit him. There are many unfinished matters affecting the Italian theatre, which I need to discuss with him.
And what about Karltenbrunner?
We both know that Karltenbrunner is trying to develop his own line for Switzerland for peace negotiations, says Wolff. But I implore you, do not let him ruin our plan with a competing one. Yeah, I bet you're saying that.
Literally the word competing.
Literally the word competing.
these goddamn Nazis. Yeah. And Dulles is not going to pursue talks with Karltenbrunner. But, I mean, this is interesting because the two pressures the Allies are under, or in Dulles' mind, is the Soviet distaste with a separate deal, isn't it? That's the thing he's actually got to deal with, really. That, this possible Soviet reaction, and this redoubt question, where the Americans are getting quite hung up on the idea of the redoubt, aren't they? So Dulles is thinking, okay, nearly but not quite, isn't he?
Yeah.
And also, they don't want to jeopardize, they can't jeopardize their relationship with the Soviets over someone like Wolff, can they? I mean, he's not worth it.
No. So Wolff gets back and he goes on up through the Brenner Pass, then to Bad Neuhem, where on the 23rd of March, he reaches Kesselring's headquarters. And as he gets there, the news just arrives that the Allies are crossing the Rhine on that very same day, the 23rd of March. So obviously this is not great news for Wolff because Kesselring's a little bit distracted, but he does speak to him. And he finds Kesselring actually... on the face of it, an open door. And he says he seemed quite ready to fall in with our plans, provided the thing was done openly, either with the consent of the Führer or after his death. It's like, what?
Yeah.
He didn't want any conflicts or anything that would mean breaking his oath.
Well, there's the oath.
But obviously Wolff is thinking, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll massage that, but I'll get round it.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? The Wolff knows that probability is the Führer's going to kill himself, right? That speaks to him knowing the Führer's mindset as well as anyone else, doesn't he?
Yeah.
How else is he going to die? You know, he's not going to pick up a rifle. That's an extremely shrewd reading of things, isn't it, actually?
Yeah, it is amazing. And also what Wolff is suddenly seeing now is just thinking, if I can just get Kesselring to support, to give a kind of nudge to von Batinghoff, then maybe I can get this all wrapped up in Italy literally in the next few days. Yeah. And if I can get it through in the next few days, I mean, he knows that the Allied offensive is brewing. Everyone does. Yeah. This is Mark Clark as the Army Group Commander in Italy. It's a final spring offensive. It's coming. Let's avoid it. Let's avoid any further lives, both Allied and German. And so he knows this is a golden opportunity. So clearly he's absolutely stolen the march on Karltenbrunner. The problem is Karltenbrunner is getting wind of what Wolff is up to. And he knows this from Gruppenführer Horster, the head of the SD in Verona, who has been Karltenbrunner's mole. And this is because he's an SD man.
Yeah, and has found out about him seeing Dulles.
Yeah, he hasn't found out about Ascona, but he has found out about the first one.
Yeah.
And Karltenbrunner has sneaked to Himmler.
Yeah. And
while Wolff can ignore Karltenbrunner going, I need to see you in Innsbruck, he can't ignore Himmler.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And Himmler has now issued orders for Wolff to fly to Berlin. So at the very moment when Wolff is on the cusp of securing a really, really properly, significantly early unconditional surrender in Italy, he's now got to go and right into the Wolf's den.
Well, there we go. So that ends part 1 of the duel, Wolff versus Karltenbrunner.
Oh, it's just amazing stuff, isn't it?
I mean, the web they've weaved by this stage of the war.
The web they have woven.
Come on, allies at war? People insist on writing those books. What's this?
Oh, I know.
Anyway, we hope you've enjoyed that. Part 2 along shortly. Of course, the way to speed that along would be to become officer class on our Apple podcast channel or become a We Have Ways patron at Patreon. Don't forget, We Have Ways Fest, 12th to the 14th September next year, where you can sit in the same giant tent as us and listen to us do this precise kind of war waffle and many, many other speakers, writers, historians and personalities. Thanks very much for listening. Who will triumph, Wolff or Karltenbrunner? Find out in the next episode.
Will it be? Will Eva escape the hangman's noose?
Tschüssi, tschüss.
Tschüssi, tschüss.